I stood there frozen, staring at the huge red and white sign drilled into the post. My blood boiled as I read it over and over again. HOA private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted. It was smack in the middle of my ranch. My ranch. 2,000 acres. Gone. Behind the sign, a bulldozer was pushing a line of wooden posts into the ground, marking out plots. Men in bright orange vests were walking around like they owned the place. I rushed toward them yelling, "What the hell are you doing on my land?" One of them, holding a clipboard, didn't even look up. "This parcel is now under HOA jurisdiction, sir. Please leave the area unless you're authorized." My heart stopped. HOA jurisdiction? This land doesn't even belong to an HOA. I demanded answers, but they just kept working like I was invisible. That's when it hit me. Something big was happening here. Something illegal. And I was right in the middle of it. But what I didn't know yet was just how deep it went. Let's go back to where it all started. My name is Daniel Cross. I'm a rancher, been running cattle, growing corn, and working this land in central Texas for the past 23 years. My ranch was passed down from my granddad to my dad and now me. It's called Coyote Hills, a name that came from the wild ones that still howl under the moonlight out here. I've always stayed away from city life and kept to myself. Folks knew me as the quiet guy who'd show up once a month at the farmer's market with the freshest produce and the sweetest peaches you'd ever taste. Life was simple. I worked hard, paid my taxes, and helped neighbors when I could. That's just how I was raised. A few years back, the land to the south of my property started getting developed. Some company came in and built a gated community called Silver Glen Estates. Fancy homes, tennis courts, shiny mailboxes, and rules for everything. They even had an HOA, a homeowners association. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured they'd stick to their own side and leave us country folk alone. That was until the letters started coming in the mail. The first one was polite. "Dear Mr. Cross, as a nearby landowner, we invite you to consider joining the Silver Glen Homeowners Association. Benefits include security patrols, community trash collection, and property value growth." I tossed it in the fire. My land wasn't part of their development. I didn't need their benefits. I had a generator, my own well, my own security cameras, and a whole lot more peace and quiet than they did. The next letter wasn't so friendly. Notice of boundary adjustment. Please be advised that recent annexation by Silver Glen HOA includes portions of your land. Please see attached for updated property zoning. Annexation? That had to be a mistake. No one can just take land, right? I drove down to the county recorder's office to figure out what was going on. I met with a clerk named Jeanette. Sweet older lady with reading glasses that always slid down her nose. She pulled up the plat map and zoning records. She frowned. "Well, that's odd. According to this, Silver Glen submitted an annexation map 2 months ago. Looks like the county approved it." I leaned forward. "Approved what exactly?" "According to this," she tapped her screen, "they filed that your land was unclaimed, and the county stamped it." "Unclaimed?" I barked. "I've got tax records, deeds, photos from 3 generations working that land. It's my ranch." She nodded slowly, looking worried. "It's not right, but it's legal, at least on paper." That night, I barely slept. I sat on the porch with a flashlight and my family's deed in hand, flipping through it again and again. My great-granddad registered this land in 1911. There were photos of him breaking ground with a plow and 2 mules, and now the county just decided it's unclaimed. I called a lawyer the next morning, a sharp young guy named Russell Kane who grew up in town and had a reputation for going toe-to-toe with City Hall. After reviewing everything, he nodded and said, "This stinks of land theft, and I'm guessing money changed hands somewhere. But lawsuits took time, and money, and while I was filing paperwork and fighting it in court, the HOA was already acting like they owned it. They put up fences, hired private security, cut down trees, even tore through a creek bed I had carefully protected for wildlife. They claimed it was for aesthetic purposes, to match the new landscaping plan. My cows had nowhere to drink. But the moment that pushed me over the edge came one morning when I was checking the fence line near the southern border. That's when I saw a black SUV parked on my dirt road. Out stepped a short man in a suit, holding a tablet. "You Daniel Cross?" he asked, not even looking at me. "I am," I replied. He tapped something on his screen and said, "You're trespassing. You need to vacate this property within 7 days or face legal consequences from Silver Glen Estates." I laughed. "You're trespassing on my ranch. I don't owe your HOA a single thing. This isn't even your jurisdiction." He looked up, annoyed. "That's not what the county says." That night, I got the letter. Certified mail. Thick packet. Inside was an official notice of possession and control, filed by Silver Glen HOA, claiming 2,000 acres of my ranch now belonged to them and was to be converted into future HOA recreational zones, pathways, and estate expansions. I felt sick. I called Russell in a panic. "They're taking everything," he responded. "We need to file for an emergency injunction. But even that might take weeks. They're betting you'll get tired and give up." Give up? That wasn't in my blood. My granddad didn't survive the Dust Bowl just so I could roll over for a bunch of yuppie rulemakers. Still, I felt like I was being swallowed up. For the next few days, I did everything I could. I brought in local news crews. I gave interviews. I showed them the animals that were displaced, the trees being bulldozed, the old barn that had been on the cover of a ranching magazine now turned into a pile of wood chips. Social media started to pick it up. People were furious. Hashtags popped up. Save Coyote Hills and hands off the ranch. But Silver Glen HOA didn't back down. In fact, they doubled down. On a Wednesday morning, I heard loud engines outside. I ran out, heart racing. A convoy of construction trucks was driving right through my ranch. Cement mixers, gravel trucks, earth movers, all heading toward the center pasture. I jumped into my old red Ford and raced after them. And that's when I saw it. They had already broken ground, concrete footers, rebar cages, survey flags, and a massive sign, "Future site of Silver Glen Community Center and luxury tennis courts." I slammed the brakes, jumped out and screamed, "Stop! You can't do this." But they didn't stop. One of the men shouted over the noise of a jackhammer, "This land belongs to the HOA now." I was shaking, not with fear but with rage. I reached for my phone and dialed Russell. He picked up immediately. "Dan?" "They just broke ground," I said, voice cracking. "They're building a tennis court right where my dad used to raise horses." There was silence on the other end. Then Russell said, "Then it's time we go to war." And right at that moment, something exploded near the north field. Not a bomb, but an entire water line burst. Mud sprayed 20 feet into the air. The workers started shouting. I looked toward the ridge, and I saw a group of angry neighbors, pitchforks, banners, and video cameras. They had come. But what they did next shocked even me. The crowd didn't just stand there. They charged. About 30 people, ranchers, neighbors, veterans, even a few teenagers from the local FFA club, stormed down the ridge and into the open field. They weren't armed, but they didn't need to be. They had phones, signs, and enough fire in their voices to rattle every single construction worker on site. "This is Daniel's ranch," one woman screamed. "You stole our land," another shouted. The workers panicked. Some dropped their tools and backed off. Others jumped into their vehicles and drove away, tires kicking up thick clouds of dust as they peeled off into the hills. I just stood there frozen, watching my neighbors reclaim my land like it was Normandy Beach. One guy climbed the freshly mounted HOA sign and yanked it clean out of the dirt. He held it above his head like a trophy. Someone shoved a microphone in my face, one of the reporters who had gotten wind of the chaos. "Mr. Cross, is it true the HOA is building a community center on your land without permission?" I nodded slowly, still dazed. "Not just a community center. Tennis courts, sidewalks, gated roads. They're paving over my family's history." Before I could say more, the man in the suit from earlier, the one who'd told me I was trespassing, returned with a group of security guards. His face was red with fury. "Everyone needs to clear this area immediately. This is HOA property." One of the ranchers, an older man with a long beard named Hank, stepped forward and said loudly, "We don't take orders from HOA thieves." The security guard stepped in front of him, and for a tense second, I thought it was going to turn violent. But then the sheriff showed up. Sheriff Marla Bexley was a no-nonsense woman who wore her badge like it was carved from iron. She pulled up in her patrol truck, got out slow, and walked right up to the scene like she was walking into a saloon shootout. "Someone want to explain why I've got 10 calls about a riot on Coyote Hills?" she asked, eyes hidden behind her sunglasses. I opened my mouth, but the HOA man beat me to it. "Sheriff, this man is trespassing on HOA land. He rallied a mob. He's interfering with legally permitted construction." Marla raised one eyebrow. "Last I checked, this land was part of Daniel Cross's family ranch." "According to county documents," the man began. She cut him off with a hand wave. "Don't quote papers at me unless you want me to start quoting the law at you." The crowd went silent. She turned to me. "You got your papers, Daniel?" I nodded and handed her my folder. Copies of the deed, tax records, even satellite images with timestamps. She flipped through them for 30 seconds, then closed the folder slowly. She turned to the HOA man. "Until I get a court order saying otherwise, you and your crew are trespassing. Pack up. Now." His mouth hung open. "You don't have the authority." She stepped forward. "You want to test that, son?" The security guards quickly backed off. The HOA rep cursed under his breath and signaled his team to pull out. As they did, the crowd cheered like we'd just won a championship game, but it didn't last long. That afternoon, I got served with a restraining order, filed by Silver Glen Estates HOA. They claimed I had incited a riot, threatened community safety, and illegally impeded authorized construction. My jaw dropped. They invaded my land, and now I was the criminal? Russell came over with a folder in his hand and frustration in his eyes. "They're flipping the script, Dan," he said. "They're building a case that you're the problem, not them." I asked, "Can they really do that?" "They're hoping the court sees it that way before you get a chance to present the full truth. Their lawyers are playing dirty. This is going to be a war of paperwork now." And he wasn't kidding. Every day I got more letters, threats, and notices. HOA fines, court dates, zoning violations. According to them, I had parked unauthorized vehicles, my tractors, kept non-approved livestock, my goats, and violated architectural standards, my barn. Russell fought back hard. He filed motions, injunctions, appeals. But the HOA had deep pockets and powerful friends. And then a week later, the court granted them a temporary injunction. They could keep building, as long as the legal battle continued. I couldn't believe it. One morning, I walked out and saw cement trucks again. They were pouring the foundation for the tennis courts. I just stood there, helpless. The same land where my daughter took her first steps, where my dad taught me to ride, was being turned into a concrete slab with HOA logos painted on it. That night, I sat on the porch with my boots off, rocking slowly in the chair my granddad built. I was losing the war. That's when I got the call. It was a woman's voice. Rough, no nonsense. "You don't know me, Mr. Cross, but I saw you on the news. I used to work for the land surveyor that helped Silver Glen get that annexation passed." I sat up straight. "Yeah? I have something you'll want to see." My hands tightened around the phone. "What is it?" she whispered. "Proof. That they lied. That the annexation is fake." I almost dropped the phone. "Are you serious?" But she didn't answer. She hung up. And I didn't have a name. The next morning, an unmarked manila envelope showed up at my front gate. Inside it, maps, emails, contracts, and one letter, typed, anonymous. It said, "Silver Glen HOA forged the land annexation paperwork. They used expired survey data, and the county clerk who signed it has family on the HOA board. I couldn't say anything back then. But I can now. I hope this helps. Burn this after reading. I didn't burn it. I ran straight to Russell. He flipped through the papers, his face growing paler with each page. This is explosive. Can we use it in court? He looked unsure. We'll need to verify it, but if this is real, it means their entire claim is built on fraud. I stared at him. So what now? He leaned back in the chair, thinking. We don't just fight this in court anymore. We go public, big. Let the whole country see what they've done. I nodded slowly. But I didn't know that while we were planning our next move, the HOA had already made theirs. That night I heard the dogs barking like crazy. I ran outside and saw flashing lights near the barn. Smoke, shouting, and then, boom! The entire north wall of my barn exploded, engulfed in flames. My heart stopped. The fire was spreading fast, and standing just beyond the trees were two men in suits watching silently. I sprinted toward the barn, barefoot and panicked, my lungs seizing from the thick smoke already clouding the air. I could hear my goats bleating in terror, some still trapped inside. My service dog, Ranger, barked at the flames but didn't hesitate. He ran straight into the smoke. "Ranger!" I screamed, dropping to my knees, choking. Just then, my neighbors came racing in from the road. Hank led the charge with a water tank hooked to the back of his truck. He yanked the hose and started blasting the flames. Other folks grabbed buckets, shovels, whatever they could find. We fought the fire for nearly an hour. By the time the flames were out, the north side of the barn was completely gone. Blackened beams, melted tools, a smoking pile of ash and twisted metal. But we saved the animals. And then, just as I thought things couldn't get worse, Ranger limped out of the rubble, soaked, scorched, but alive. I dropped to my knees again, hugging him as tightly as I could. He licked my face and gave a soft bark, tail thumping once against the dirt. But something else caught my eye. Lying just a few feet from the barn, half buried in the grass, was a scorched piece of plastic. Some kind of broken access badge. I picked it up with shaking fingers. On the back was a faded logo. Silver Glen Security. Hank came over, looked at the badge, and said what we were all thinking. They did this. That same night, I filed a report with the sheriff's department. Marla came out in person, walked through the scene, took photos, and bagged the evidence. "I'll get this analyzed," she said. "But if they're behind it, they've crossed a federal line now." I didn't sleep. I just sat on the porch, shotgun across my lap, watching the horizon. By morning, Russell had already called me. "I'm filing for an emergency protective order and petitioning for criminal investigation." "Think it'll go anywhere?" He paused. "Depends. But the evidence we have now, the forged documents, the anonymous letter, and this fire, it's enough to open a case." For a moment there was hope, until the HOA struck again. I received a letter via courier. Inside was a single typed page with a stamped HOA seal at the top. "Mr. Cross, due to your non-compliance and repeated obstruction, your land will now be entered into eminent domain proceedings. As per our development charter and recent county approval, all necessary steps to reclaim and redevelop Silver Glen Expansion Zone 7 will continue." They were claiming my land through eminent domain now? That's something only the government could do. I showed the letter to Russell, furious. "They can't do this. They're not even a city. They're a homeowners association." He read the letter twice, his face tight. "They're pretending to act under a county clause that allows land use for public infrastructure development, but HOAs can't invoke that on private land outside their jurisdiction. It's a bluff, Dan, but they're trying to wear you down." I slammed my fist into the kitchen table. They burned down my barn. They forged documents, and now they're trying to steal the rest of my land under fake laws? Russell leaned in, calm but sharp. "That's why we need to strike back, and fast." We gathered everything. Photos of the damage, the anonymous letter, the forged surveys. I even gave Russell the Silver Glen badge I found in the grass. Then we did what Russell called lighting the fire under their backside. We gave it all to the press. 1 week later, a 60-minute special aired, Farmland Under Fire, how an HOA tried to steal a Texas ranch. People were shocked. Calls poured in, donations, legal support. Even retired attorneys from Austin offered to help. And then something truly unexpected happened. A former county employee came forward. Her name was Beverly Monroe. She had worked in the records department for 15 years. She went on live TV and said the HOA board had pressured her supervisor to rush the annexation through, skipping steps, ignoring public notices, and forging one of the survey signatures. That changed everything. Now it wasn't just a civil matter, it was criminal. Marla, the sheriff, personally called in the Texas Rangers. The investigation was going full force now, and for the first time in weeks, I thought, maybe I had a shot at saving my ranch. But the HOA wasn't finished. 2 nights later, I was sitting in my truck just outside the property line, watching construction lights flicker like fireflies in the distance. Ranger was in the passenger seat, alert and growling softly. That's when I noticed something strange. A small team of men, maybe 5 or 6, were sneaking onto the property through the south fence line. They had flashlights, wire cutters, and what looked like stakes and spray paint. Ranger let out a sharp bark. I grabbed my phone and hit record. I stayed quiet, low in the truck, filming as the men cut through my electric fence and started marking new boundaries, way beyond what the HOA had even claimed in their fake documents. They were stealing more land. Just as I reached for my shotgun, I saw one of the men drop something near my hay bales. It was a black box. I couldn't tell what it was at first, but when one of them struck a match and started walking toward it, I realized exactly what was about to happen. "Ranger, stay." I flung the truck door open and shouted, "Hey, back off!" The men scattered like rats, but not before one of them threw the lit match. I sprinted toward the hay, heart pounding. Then, boom! The blast was small, more smoke than fire, but it was meant to intimidate. I dropped to the ground, ears ringing, vision spinning. Ranger ran up next to me, whining and licking my face. In the distance, I heard tires screeching, someone fleeing in a pickup. I sat up slowly, looking around the field. The explosion hadn't damaged much, but it had left a smoking message burned into the grass. They were done playing games. This wasn't just about land anymore. It was personal. And if they thought I was backing down now, they had no idea what was coming. By morning, I had the footage from my truck's dash cam and phone copied, backed up, and handed straight to Sheriff Marla and Russell. When Marla saw the footage of the men sneaking in, cutting my fence, and dropping that black box, her jaw clenched hard enough to crack a tooth. They escalated. This isn't just trespassing anymore. This is criminal intimidation and possible use of explosives. We're calling in the ATF. That's when I knew things were about to hit national news again. And they did. The footage went viral. Headlines exploded. HOA caught planting explosive device on private ranch in Texas. Ranch war escalates when HOAs go too far. But the real blow came when the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives showed up at my ranch in black SUVs. They did a sweep, interviewed witnesses, and collected the remains of that black box. I watched from the porch as one of them, an older agent with a thick beard, held up the scorched fragments and whistled. "This isn't just fireworks," he muttered. "This was designed to frighten. Might have been homemade, but it was built with a purpose." I asked, "Will someone get arrested?" "Maybe, if we can trace the materials and find out who built it." Russell, meanwhile, was building our case like a man possessed. He had compiled a mountain of evidence, the forged documents, the HOA emails, the shady land maps, the burned barn, and now the bombing attempt. We were ready to go to court. But before the trial date arrived, we got an unexpected visitor. A black Mercedes pulled up the ranch's long gravel road. Out stepped a woman in a silk blouse, designer sunglasses, and the most ridiculous high heels I'd ever seen on a ranch. She introduced herself as Veronica Lambert, president of the Silver Glen HOA. She didn't even wait for me to offer a seat. She just walked up like she owned the place and said, "Mr. Cross, let's talk." I didn't say a word, just crossed my arms and waited. She gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You've stirred up quite the media frenzy, but we both know public sympathy doesn't stand in a courtroom." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that a threat?" She chuckled. "No, a proposal." She handed me a folder. Inside were pages filled with printed renderings of fancy homes, green lawns, fountains, and bike trails. "This is what we're building," she said. "Silver Glen expansion. We want your land because it fits perfectly into our design. You're holding back progress, but I'm prepared to offer you $7 million for it. Right now, no court." I stared at her like she had grown a second head. $7 million for 2,000 acres of family heritage?" I said. "You think that's a good deal?" She leaned in. "Better than jail time, Mr. Cross. Do you know what your little outbursts look like in court? Incitement, aggravated threats, illegal gatherings, maybe even obstruction." I took a step forward, my voice quiet but cold. "You torched my barn. You blew up my field. You sent men onto my land with wire cutters and threats." Veronica smirked. "Do you have proof I did any of that?" I stared at her in silence. That's when she said the one thing that snapped something inside me. "Sometimes you have to bury the past to make way for a better future." I didn't respond. I just slowly closed the folder, handed it back, and said, "Get off my land." Her smile vanished. "You'll regret this," she muttered, turning on her heel and stomping back to her Mercedes. And I did regret something. Regret that I didn't have a shovel handy to bury her arrogance right there on the spot. 2 days later, things got worse. The county clerk's office, the same one that had signed off on the annexation months ago, suddenly lost my original deed records. Gone. Vanished from the database. I went in person, hands trembling with rage, and demanded answers. A young clerk stuttered nervously. "It must have been a system crash. We're trying to recover backups." Russell slammed his palm on the desk. "That's federal documentation. If you deleted it, accidentally or not, you just obstructed a land ownership case." I stood in silence, because I knew this wasn't a mistake. It was sabotage. But God bless Jeanette, the older clerk who'd first helped me months back. She stepped out from behind the stacks and whispered to me, "Daniel, come with me." She took us to a back room. From a drawer, she pulled out a sealed envelope. "I printed your deed the day all this began," she said. "Just in case. I've been in this office too long not to smell something fishy." I almost cried. She handed it to Russell. "They can delete files, but they can't delete this." With that in hand, we left. Back at the ranch, while Russell worked on refiling and alerting the state, I decided I'd had enough of being reactive. It was time to take the fight to them. So I did the one thing they never saw coming. I opened up the ranch to the public. I invited everyone: news crews, environmental groups, veterans organizations, historical preservationists, animal welfare groups. I gave tours. I showed the old oak tree where my grandpa had carved his initials. I pointed out the Native American arrowheads we'd found in the fields. I highlighted the importance of the creek, home to endangered birds. And people listened. Within a week, petitions with tens of thousands of signatures were flooding the county office. The Texas Historic Preservation Society even issued an emergency review to declare Coyote Hills a protected cultural site. The HOA panicked. But then, in a shocking twist of fate, the most damning piece of evidence fell into our lap like a gift from heaven. One of the HOA's own board members, a guy named Tom Everett, resigned and came forward. He sat down for a live interview and confessed to everything. Yes, we faked the survey. Yes, we paid off the clerk's supervisor. And yes, we authorized the pressure campaign against Daniel Cross. I couldn't sleep anymore. I'm done lying. The video blew up. Silver Glen HOA's board was immediately served with subpoenas, but just when we thought the nightmare was ending, I got one final letter. This time from a big, powerful law firm in Dallas representing private investors who had just bought out Silver Glen Estates entirely, and now they were claiming they owned everything, including my ranch. I looked at the letter. Then I looked up at the land outside. My land. This wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. The letter from the Dallas law firm felt heavier than paper should. It sat on my kitchen table like a snake, coiled and ready to strike. I stared at it for a long time, then slid it across to Russell, who had just walked in with a steaming cup of coffee. He read it, his face darkening with each line. "They're trying to outmaneuver us again," he muttered. "This isn't the HOA anymore. These are private equity developers, big money guys. They don't want a tennis court. They want to flip your entire ranch into a luxury resort or some kind of exclusive retreat for billionaires." "They think they can just buy history?" I asked, my voice raw. "They don't care about history. They care about land and how much profit they can squeeze out of it." That same day, trucks started rolling in again, but this time not from Silver Glen. These were newer, fancier, branded with a name I'd never seen. Ridgeview Ventures. The workers were different too, private contractors in slick uniforms, some even with armed escorts. They carried clipboards, maps, and small drones. They didn't say a word to me. They didn't have to. One of them, parked right by my barn's burned remains, stepped out and started scanning the land with a tablet. I walked over and asked him what he was doing. "Environmental assessment," he said flatly. "Standard for land redevelopment." "Redevelopment?" I asked. "This land is under criminal investigation." He smirked. "Not according to our paperwork." That night, I called Russell in a panic. "They're here again, man, but they're not hiding anymore." He sighed on the other end. "They bought Silver Glen outright. Now they're pretending the past doesn't matter. But here's the twist. We just got a court date. Judge Harris. Federal court." I blinked. "Federal?" "Yeah. And she's no fan of land grabs. If we can prove even half of what we've got, we'll blow them out of the water." Hope flickered again. But the next blow came fast and hard. While preparing for court, I received an official notice taped to my front gate. Eviction order. The sheriff's seal stamped in the corner. I stormed straight to Marla's office. "This ain't your doing, is it?" I asked. She looked like she'd just swallowed a bucket of nails. "Dan, I didn't authorize that. They went around me. Filed it through a judge in a neighboring county claiming you're a squatter." I laughed bitterly. "A squatter? I've lived here for 23 years. They're testing you, trying to break your spirit before the hearing." I went home and found my fences cut again. One of my cows wandered near the highway. That same day, a crew from Ridgeview showed up with a bulldozer, claiming they had permits to clear out abandoned sheds. It was my dad's workshop. I stood in front of the bulldozer, arms spread wide, shotgun slung across my back. "You'll have to run me over first," I told the driver. He backed up, but only for now. Later that evening, as I fixed the fences with Ranger at my side, headlights appeared at the edge of the ranch road. A sleek black car rolled to a stop. The back window slid down. And out of it, a familiar voice echoed. "Mr. Cross, you're making this much harder than it needs to be." It was Veronica Lambert. Again. Only this time she didn't look smug. She looked exhausted, or maybe scared. "You need to take the offer," she said. "You're not just dealing with HOA people anymore. These guys don't play by the rules." I didn't answer. She leaned forward. "You think court is going to save you? They've got judges. They've got politicians. They'll drown you in legal fees and red tape." She paused. "Last chance, 10 million. Walk away." I stared into her eyes, calm and steady. "You ever stand on this land at sunrise?" I asked. "You ever hear the coyotes yipping just before dawn? Or watched your grandkid ride a horse where your father once plowed the soil by hand? She didn't answer. That's worth more than all the money in the world, I said. The window rolled up. The car turned and drove away. I thought that was the last I'd see of her, but it wasn't. The next morning my power went out. My well pump stopped working. My phone line was dead. Even my satellite Wi-Fi was mysteriously disconnected. Russell drove in from town, furious. They're targeting your utilities. Likely paid someone to cut them at the junction. We set up generators. The neighbors brought water. Folks delivered food, even hay for the animals. And then came the biggest surprise yet. A black SUV pulled up quietly just after dusk. Out stepped a tall man in a crisp suit, military posture. Silver hair, square jaw. "Mr. Cross?" he said. I nodded. "My name is Major General Kenneth Abrams, retired. I saw your story." He handed me a card. Underneath his name was a line that read, "Veterans Land Protection Network." "I've seen stuff like this before," he said. "In foreign countries. Never thought I'd see it in Texas." He looked out over the fields. "This ranch is a symbol now, and you're not alone." Over the next week, more support poured in. Veterans, native land rights groups, agricultural preservation coalitions. Even a few country musicians offered to hold a benefit concert, but the developers didn't stop. 3 nights before the court date, I caught 2 men sneaking around my tractor shed. I fired a warning shot in the air and they vanished into the night. I called Marla again. She promised patrols. The next morning, I found my cattle fence cut again. Ranger followed the scent, barking furiously, until he led me to a pile of something buried in the soil. It was a bag. Inside it, a stack of forged land titles, copies of my signature. They were planning something big. I raced home, heart pounding, and called Russell. "They're going to present fake deeds in court." He didn't even pause. "Then we better beat them to it." And the morning of the trial, something happened that even I didn't expect. A whistleblower from Ridgeview Ventures walked into the courthouse with a hard drive full of internal emails. What was on it was about to change everything. Inside the courtroom, the air was electric. People packed into every seat, news cameras rolling quietly in the back. I sat at the plaintiff's table beside Russell, who was flipping through our stack of evidence like a preacher flipping scripture. Across the aisle sat a team of 5 lawyers dressed in $1,000 suits. Behind them was Veronica Lambert, trying to look composed, but her twitching fingers said otherwise. The Ridgeview Ventures rep, a cold-looking man with sharp cheekbones and slicked-back hair, sat beside her like a statue. Then came the moment that turned everything. Judge Harris, a sharp woman with piercing gray eyes, took the bench and opened the hearing. "I've reviewed the submitted documents regarding the annexation and land dispute between Daniel Cross and Silver Glen HOA, now under Ridgeview Ventures. But before we proceed, I've been made aware of new evidence." All eyes turned as the doors opened at the back of the courtroom. In walked a young man in a wrinkled blue shirt, carrying a small silver hard drive. "This is Jeremy Kane," Russell said, standing. "Former IT contractor for Ridgeview Ventures. He has sworn testimony and digital records that reveal direct evidence of forged documents, fraudulent annexation filings, bribery of public officials, and internal communications confirming knowledge of the false land claims." Gasps echoed around the room. Judge Harris motioned him forward. "Mr. Kane, please approach and submit the device for review." Jeremy handed the drive to the court clerk. "Everything you need is in there. Emails, signatures they copied, even internal chats where they joked about tricking the hick with the hat. That hick was Mr. Cross." I didn't even flinch. I just looked straight at Veronica. She didn't meet my eyes. For the next 2 hours, Russell walked the court through the hard drive's contents. It was all there. Time-stamped evidence showing how Ridgeview had acquired the HOA, paid for the surveyor's silence, and manipulated zoning records. Even blueprints for a luxury resort with the title Coyote Hills Redevelopment Master Plan were on the drive. The defense tried to object. "Your Honor, This was obtained illegally, but Judge Harris shut them down. It was provided voluntarily by a whistleblower, and it's admissible. Then Russell dropped the hammer. He projected a digital document on the screen, an email chain with the subject line, "Covering our tracks." One email read, "Once the barn is gone, he'll fold. Hit him with fines. Eviction next. Just drag it out till he's broke or gone." The courtroom went dead silent. Judge Harris leaned forward. "Is this how Ridgeview Ventures does business?" Their lead attorney fumbled for words. Veronica stood up, hands shaking. "I had no idea about those emails. Judge Harris cut her off. "Sit down." In the final moments of the hearing, Russell brought out the original deed saved by Jeanette from the county office. He read aloud, "Filed and recorded, July 2nd, 1911. Owner, Jonathan Cross. Boundaries, 2,080 acres, west and north of Willow Creek, known as Coyote Hills." He looked up. This land was never unclaimed. It was never annexed. It was never part of Silver Glen. The entire basis of the HOA and Ridgeview's claim is a lie. Judge Harris took a deep breath and spoke slowly. "This court finds that Daniel Cross is the rightful and legal owner of the 2,000-acre property known as Coyote Hills. All annexation claims are nullified. All Ridgeview Ventures development is hereby ordered to cease immediately. Criminal charges will be pursued by the state." The crowd erupted in cheers. Some cried. Others hugged. Hank was fist-pumping in the back row. Even the reporters clapped. Veronica didn't say a word. She just lowered her head. The Ridgeview rep stood up, straightened his suit, and walked out like a man who knew he had just lost millions. Outside the courthouse, I stepped into the sunlight with Ranger at my side. Cameras flashed. Mics were shoved in my face. "What will you do now, Mr. Cross?" I smiled. "Go home. Fix my barn, walk the fence, and sit on my porch in peace, just like I've done for 23 years. But what message do you have for people watching?" I looked into the camera and said, "Don't let anyone bully you off your roots. No HOA, no developer, no outsider can take what's built on blood, sweat, and family. Stand your ground." The reporters ate it up. Back at the ranch, life slowly returned to normal. Neighbors came to celebrate with pie, barbecue, and music. The burned barn was rebuilt, brick by brick, with the help of everyone who had supported me. We painted the words, "Coyote Hills Forever," across the top beam. Weeks later, I got a call from the Veterans Land Protection Network. They asked if I wanted to help others facing similar fights. I said yes, because if they came for me once, they'd come for others too. And we'd be ready. Thanks for watching this incredible story. If you were hooked by Daniel Cross's battle to protect his land, smash that like button. Let us know in the comments what you would have done in his shoes, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more jaw-dropping real-life battles against greedy HOAs. Because sometimes the underdog wins.